Take three. This is the third time I've tried this morning. Every time I F it up. So, Dave TV for the 5th of October. How y'all doing, everybody? It's a beautiful, warm Saturday here in the Washington area. It feels a little more like August than October. But what are you going to do about that? So the big news yesterday, all the major TV networks interrupted their programming to announce that Don Geronimo is no longer working at KHTK, the CBS-owned sports talker in Sacramento, which is the capital of California. Why is that relevant to us here at DCR TV? Don Geronimo has been partnered with Mike O'Mara since the mid-'80s, and they did their show, afternoon show, or the morning show actually, at WAVA 105.1 up until the early 90s, and then WAVA was sold from Emmis to Salem. Salem's a religious broadcaster, and of course didn't want crazy Don and Mike on mid-morning, so Don and Mike left the station and went over to WJFK, which eventually was CBS owned by then, I guess. And WJFK was kind of flipping from it. They used to have a kind of a new agey format that surf programmed as WBMW. Now they're flipping over to kind of a guy talk format. They had Howard Stern on in mornings. They put Don and Mike on in afternoons. And Don and Mike trucked through the 90s all the way through until 2008. And eventually Don Geronimo said, hey, his wife had recently died in a car accident, and he was just, I think, tired of the radio biz, and he'd been feuding with a lot of folks. And so anyhow, he just left the show in April of 2008, took a little time off, went out to Ocean City, did some radio work in the Ocean City area, and then eventually ended up in Sacramento. Why Sacramento? Well, when Don and Mike's show was on WJFK, they syndicated it into just a number of markets, and Sacramento was one of their top markets. They seemed to be really popular there. So Don was already well known in Sacramento. He went there and worked at sports talker KHTK, which is also a CBS station. That's been basically, I think he did the afternoon shift, and then he with a midday shift, and then they moved him to mornings, and then back to middays, and then yesterday the big news was he's gone from there. Apparently they've replaced him, and the word is that Don wasn't talking enough sports, and that's Don. Don, well, he does like sports. He's a big Redskins fan and all that. He also tends to talk a lot about his personal life and other things. So anyhow, the pop culture and stuff like that. So it's a big mix. And, you listen to sports talkers these days, you listen to the junkies and whatever. They also talk a lot about popular culture and music and other things and entertainment and movie reviews. So, putting other stuff into the mix other than sports on a sports talker is not uncommon these days. But anyhow, whatever. So Don is gone from KHTK in Sacramento. The word is, of course, that he's still under contract to CBS. They can take you off the air, but your contract is still there. Now, I don't know how long his contract runs for. So basically, CBS can, either just park him and pay him and, vacation, so to speak, and you get paid until your contract's up, or they can, you can make a deal to work for another CBS station somewhere. So what's going to happen to Don? Is he going to come back to Washington? The interesting thing is that his former partner, Mike O'Mara, who, they were together for 20 plus years at WAVA and WJFK. Mike O'Mara has a radio show. He has a podcast at MikeO'MaraShow.com. But his podcast has also been edited up and run on the radio here in the Washington area on WTNT. But WTNT is flipping format on December 1 to a Spanish contemporary hits format. So it looks like Mike O'Mara's radio show, that radio airing of his podcast is going to end. So we're kind of at a weird situation here in all these careers. Don Geronimo off the air in Sacramento, Mike O'Mara's radio presence here in the Washington area back kind of in limbo again. Buzz Burbank, who had been partnered with Mike O'Mara, there was kind of a little bit of a thing with them, and Buzz left the show. And so now we're kind of wondering, where is it all going? Are we seeing the stars in the universe collide, unite to maybe Don coming back to Washington and Mike Don and Mike together again, and Buzz Burbank and Rob Spiewak and Joe Ardinger. Could the stars, what's wrong with my hands? Could the stars be aligning to bring back Don and Mike in some capacity on the local radio airwaves? People are going to say, Dave, you're nuts. One of the things I've covered heavily in DCR TV over the years, in our 16 years, was Don and Mike. I always liked WJFK. I always liked Don and Mike. Always liked Howard Stern. And I listened to their show every day. And there was a time in the mid-2000s where, there was a lot of postings on the mailbag and people were feuding. And Don Geronimo was mentioning the website every day. And it was all crazy stuff. But in all, I like these guys. I think they're unique, funny. It's in a day and age of canned radio where everything sounds corporate. You listen to a lot of these morning shows on the clear channel stations and stuff, and they try to be out there, but you can tell it's just very corporate sounding. They're all in very tight little guidelines. And Don and Mike were always just wide open, and they would feud with their own stations and stuff like that. And it was really feuding. It wasn't just fake feuding. It was a lot of times you see these guys like Kane and stuff and Elliott, and they act like they're feuding with their station, and it's all kind of a shtick. But I think in Don and Mike's case, it was real. When Don was mad, he was really mad, and he would walk off the show for weeks at a time sometimes. And they had to move the studio. WJFK was in Fairfax, and they actually moved the studio over to Rockville just for their show because of all the crazy tensions and all that. So anyhow, are the stars aligning for a Don and Mike reunion? I don't know. There I go. Okay, goodbye. I look at the radio business today and I say no. The radio business today is different than it was 5 years ago. It's different. It's, where if Don and Mike were to get together and do a show like they used to do, where would they do it? I don't know. I really don't. WJFK, the most likely candidate would be going back to WJFK. But I can't see Don and Mike, going back to JFK. JFK needs to skew younger in terms of their listeners. They're going after young men. And I just, Don and Mike could probably talk some sports, but it would be mainly a non-sports show. And I just can't see them going back there to WJFK. The Junkies are doing well. Even though I can't for the life of me figure out the pairing between Arrington and Dukes. Arrington and Dukes seem to be performing, and Holden and Danny in the middays. I don't know where WJFK would put Don and Mike other than maybe evenings or weekends, and that wouldn't really work. And there's really no other CBS station in the market that I could see that they couldn't go on to Fresh. They wouldn't go on PGC. If CBS were to start an oldies station, like a WCBS FM in New York or a WOGL in Philly, here in Washington, like maybe flip WNEW to something like that, they could put Don and Mike on in the mornings, and they could have kind of a fun entertainment-y show playing some oldies and stuff. That might work. If CBS had a major oldies station in the market, I could maybe see Don and Mike doing the morning show on that. Maybe on, doing, okay, here's this. Go up to Baltimore and do the morning, put a live and local morning show on Jack FM 102.7 and have Don and Mike do that. I mean, they could work up in Baltimore. That might work. Something like that would be interesting. So if Don's under contract to CBS, that would all work because, he would stay under contract to CBS. Otherwise, if he came back to Washington, CBS could tell him what stations he could work at. If he wanted to go over to Dan Snyder's Sports Talk ESPN 980, he couldn't do that without CBS saying that's okay. And I can't imagine CBS allowing Don to come back and work at any non-CBS station in the Washington area. So it's a little complicated and all crazy like that. If Don's contract with CBS does end, maybe in some time, in a year or two, maybe he could come back and do something at another station. But again, the way radio business is today, skewing younger, kind of more corporate control over everything, it's just the radio business is going away from that old Don and Mike kind of show of 20 years there at, on the Washington airwaves. Now, another possibility would be maybe Don saved up some money. Maybe he could buy a station and just do what he wants. Buy an AMer. I'm sure you could get an AMer in the Washington market, and just buy it and then do what you want on it. Put a crazy guy talk format on it and do that and go from there. And put it on the internet and maybe get an FM translator somewhere and do that and have your own station. That would be kind of cool. And hey, Don's only in his mid-50s. I'm sure he knows a lot of folks in the radio business. You could get some funding, some financing, and do something like that. Get a couple AM signals in the Washington area and do a morning show and get Mike back on board. Now that to me seems like something more likely than anything else for Don and Mike these days. So I don't know. Or you could just do the Hail Mary pass. WNEW, CBS's WNEW is lacking in the ratings. Why don't they do something different in the mornings? Put Don and Mike on in the mornings. I mean, it would kind of blow up that. I don't see CBS doing that. The news people at CBS News would say, no, we're not going to F up our all news format and trash it like that, having Don and Mike on. Although it might really stir things up and get some ratings there at NEW, I just can't see that happening. Although, at the end of the year, despite all the talk that CBS is saying how, they're sticking with WNEW and sticking with the all news format, maybe by the end of the year, they're, it's just like, I don't know, this just ain't getting any traction. Let's flip it to oldies and put Don and Mike on in mornings. That could be, 99.1, Washington's best oldies with Don and Mike on in mornings. We're classic hits. You can't say oldies anymore. It's classic hits. That's the new PC. Washington's best classic hits with Don and Mike in mornings on 99.1 WDON. Don Radio, and we're bringing Don back. Something like that could happen. I don't know. So anyhow, or they could just Don could just come back and do a podcast. Come back to Washington. Where he could stay wherever he wants. You do a podcast from anywhere. And just do a podcast from Sacramento, or move to Hawaii, or go back to Ocean City and do a daily podcast and really push it on the internet like that. I don't know. Come back to Ocean City. He likes it there, so. Who knows, but it's interesting to speculate. Let me know what you think. What do you think Don and Mike are up to these days? Could they get back together again? We know they love each other. We know they love each other as human beings. We know that. But do they still like each other? I don't know. I don't know. But it seems to me like I just feel it in the cards now. The universe is conspiring to put Don and Mike back together again, so we'll see. All right, folks, thanks for watching my October 5th episode of Dave TV. Was there anything else I was going to mention today? Any other big news coming down the pike? Nah. Oh, here's interesting news. Speaking of CBS, Craig Heist. Craig Heist worked at WTOP from 1999 till this past spring. Long time there. Craig Heist's been doing sports reports. Apparently, he is now going to WNEW and WJFK, both CBS stations in the Washington market, where he'll be doing sports reports for the All Newser and the Sports Talker. So Craig is heading over to that. That'll be cool. Again, another WTOP voice heard on WNEW. Quite a few of those around these days. So that's interesting to speculate. All right, folks. Thanks for watching Dave TV. Don't forget, it's our 16th. We just celebrated our 16th anniversary in September, and we offered a $16 per year rate for DCR TV's Plus section, which is loaded with cool stuff. Lots of memorabilia from the Washington and Baltimore local radio TV eras, whatever. And anyhow, we're back to the normal rate now, which is $39 a year. But in October, if you forgot, whatever, you're a little tight on the money with the government shutdown, if you want to do, I'll still honor $16 requests through the month of October, okay? If somebody sends me $16, I'll give you a year of DCR TV Plus. If you send $32, I'll give you 2 years. If you send me $160, I'll give you 10. And I'm continuing to do that through October, even though technically the big deal is off. We're already into, 16 years and 1 month here at DCR TV, so anyhow. But do that. Send us some money on PayPal or pop it in the mail. Just click on the little support link there at the top of DCR TV. Thanks for watching Dave TV. Book 'em, Dano.